Okay, says Rebbe Nachman, Schus Yagun Aleinu. Let's jump right into it. Kishem shemishu Azus panim ein lo chelik b'Torah. Rebbe Nachman is about to prove from a Gemara in Chagiga Daf Yudaled that a person who has something called Azus panim, how do you translate Azus panim? Brazenness, brazen-faced person, a brazen person. Ein lo chelik b'Torah. He has no portion in this thing called Torah, which means much more than just Torah study. Right? It means a lifestyle. It means a consciousness. It means a way of being. The Torah is not just words on a page. Person who has brazenness, ein lo chelik b'Torah. He's not ready to receive his or her portion in the Torah. And he proves this from the Gemara in Chagiga, a very interesting passage in the Talmud. One of our sages teach, Davar tziva la'elef dar. There's a verse in Tehillim that refers to the Torah as being a thing, davar, or word, or words that are tziva, that were commanded la'elef dar, for 1,000 generations. So davar is always a reference to the Torah. And over here we learn that the Torah was really originally supposed to be given after 1,000 generations of human beings living on this earth. Says the Gemara, Hashem really originally intended to give the Torah after 1,000 generations of humankind. But Hashem saw that it's just not going to happen. The world is not going to last. Meaning, even on a very pragmatic societal level, humans wouldn't figure it out on their own. Basic standards of civil society. Hashem saw that it's not gonna happen, and that, I think that's true on a practical level, but also spiritually. We know that the Torah is the energy; it's the heart of the world. Without the Torah being here, so the world can't really last that long, right? The Torah is the code of the world. When we learn Torah, when we engage with the Torah, we're supercharging the heart of the world, bringing life force, energy into everything that is, which is built on the code, which is the letters of the Torah. So Hashem saw that that's not gonna happen. So what did He do? He ended up giving it after 26 generations. So what happened to the other 974 generations out of 1,000 generations? What about all those souls? Where are they? Says the Gemara this amazing thing. We have sheets over here in the middle for you. What happened to these 974 generations out of 1,000 that really weren't born in the world because the Torah ended up being given after 26? So the Gemara says this fascinating thing. Amarush Salam, Hashem, so to speak, stood up. What did Hashem do with them? The Creator of the world took these unborn 974 generations worth of souls, and He put them a little bit in every generation. V'hein hein aze panim shabadar. And in every generation, these are the troubadours. That has a positive connotation, though. These are the troublemakers. In each generation, the Azi Panim, the people that are brazen-faced, the people that are we have to come up with other words, not just brazen-faced. What else?
Strong characters.
Yeah, but it's more than strong characters. It has a very negative connotation. I think we're fine. Yeah, for now. Chutzpah, yeah, insolence, the insolent people, the arrogant people, the people that are
the determined people.
Stubborn. Yeah, stubborn.
Hard-head,
yeah, hard-necked, as we're going to see in a minute. Shei Oref, we're going to see. But for now, we're saying that these are the people to whom the Torah could not be given. And it turns out, says Rebbe Nachman, that if you figure, so who were the people that did not get the Torah? They were the Azipanim. They were the people whose souls were not fitting to receive this consciousness, refining way of life, way of thinking, way of being, way of hoping, dreaming, vision for humankind. It has to be people who are without brazenness.
So which is it? Is it that it had to be given earlier, or that these people couldn't get it?
Seems that these people couldn't get, or maybe it was both. Or maybe Hashem was trying to demonstrate to us that the reason that these people couldn't get it is because they were too brazen. So Nimsa Rebbe Nachman says, again, going back to what he began with, right, that in the same way that those who are Azei Panim or Azus Panim, that people with this strong, unbending character, brazen, that aren't acting with, well, let's think about what the opposite of brazenness is: sensitivity, openness, open-mindedness. What else is the opposite of brazen? Thoughtful.
Sensitivity.
Sensitive. Right? So people who are the opposite of all these things, ein lo chelik b'Torah. Hey, Sean, thank you so much for coming. Hey, thanks for coming. That we find that those people that are described in the Gemara as having been as panim, they were too brazen. They were of the 974 generations that did not receive the Torah. The 974 generations that for whatever reason they didn't have the sensitivity necessary to take this thing and to implement it into their lives. And there's another Gemara, the Talmud tells us in another place, our sages teach that Misha Yesh by Azus, on a very simple level, it really correlates to that previous Gemara. A person who has Azus, again, the same thing, this brazen nature. So Misha Yesh by Azus v'yadua shalei amder aglei avusav al har Sinai. It's like in a certain way you can sense whose ancestors stood by Sinai, whose ancestors stood to be Mekabel the Torah, the people who aren't as a panim. So in a certain way, it's like this strange litmus test that sometimes if you see a person, even though they're Jewish, halachically and everything, but they don't have this sensitivity and this gentle character, this openness, if they're too firm and they're too like acting in a brazen way, almost without shame. That's another aspect to it. Right? Shamelessness. So, shamelessness, exactly. Right? We're just trying to think of all these different words that describe this thing called Azus Panim. So I don't think that means that all of a sudden we assume and suspect that he's not Jewish or something like that. But it means to say it's metaphoric. It means this person is lacking a fundamental link to Sinai. Right? Because it should be clear to us that the 3 million men, women, and children who stood at the foot of that mountain, one thing they weren't, in that moment at least, was brazen. I mean, they were overwhelmed. We've been speaking a lot in these shiur in the past couple of weeks about was that cut line? I'm all disoriented. I don't know whose is whose anymore. Yeah, this is my cup. Mm-hmm. Okay. One thing is for sure is that they were humble as anything. I mean, they stood there. They were trembling. They didn't know what to do with themselves. Right? It was a completely overwhelming experience. It can't be brazen. Now, who are you going to be brazen against? Like, the infinite creator of everything, who in one moment, as the Medrash describes, turned off every sound in the entire universe. It was pure silence at that time. Because God can do that, by the way. Just parenthetically, I started speaking about this a little bit Thursday night. Alternate realities, higher realms of existence. Today with a recording studio, even DJs, right? They can take a track that was already mixed, if anybody knows anything about audio production, right? So it's a mix of a bunch of different instruments. They don't record at one time all the different instruments, especially today. They track different musicians, right? So the guy's playing drums in one place in South Africa, let's say, and you have a violinist who's playing in Vienna, and you have a piano player who's playing in Oregon, in the States, and they put all these tracks together, sometimes even live. They all track them. It's absolutely mind-blowing technology. And then they put it all together into one track. So today you have the technology to be able to take that track, and what DJs are able to do is they can deconstruct the track. That's how they remix songs, right? So they isolate the vocal element, they isolate this element and that element, and so on and so forth. Now, all of us understand how they do this using technology because they took a bunch of sounds and put them together, so then probably technologically you can figure out how to take them back apart. But like you and I living right now in this realm, there's a lot of different noises, right? There's a door that's making a noise, and somebody's scratching his head, let's say, whatever. I'm mentioning names, and someone's speaking, and the chairs are creaking, and so on and so forth. And it's like, this is it, this is life. And this is a bit of a wild thing, but you understand that from Hashem's perspective, Hashem can isolate every sound. Like by Him, everything is happening in its own space. Literally in its own space, magnified to 2 billion. By Hashem, everything that's happening really is happening in its own world. Just to appreciate, I don't know what practical application of this there is. It's just something interesting to think about. So when we think about Hashem shutting out all sound in the entire universe, and all there is the sound of the shofar, called Gadol V'lo Yasaf. It's increasingly loud energy shaking the whole world. Lightning, thunder, we can't imagine. People, they died, they came back to life every time he uttered a word. There's no brazenness in that experience. There's utter humility in that experience. We're going to get to that at the end of this lesson, and then we're going to carry on learning more about that on the other side of the sheet. There's total openness, and there's like, whoa, like I'm just a tiny little human, you know. So that means the Gemara is telling us that if you see a person that's not living in that state to such a degree that they're like aze panim, that they're brazen, it's the opposite. So then, again, what does it mean? They're not Jewish now. You have to question their yichus and make them do geirus l'chumra. Like, no, obviously you're not. You know, what does it mean though? It means that there's something important missing in their link to the experience of Sinai, to their link of being Mekabel the Torah. Nimsa sha'azus panim, says the Gemara, ein lechelek b'Torah. It emerges that a person who has this negative trait, this brazenness, this stubbornness, this, you know, ein lechelek b'Torah, so he has no connection to the Torah. Okay, so all of us understand this, right? So far, so good? Mm-hmm. So here's Rebbe Nachman's twist. And this is a very famous concept in Breslover Chassidus, which we're going to discuss now. And it's super important, and very few Sfarim speak about it. And especially for our generation, especially for the youth. And in a way, we're all youth, no matter how old or how young we are. We need this every second of every day. Kemoikein, says Rebbe Nachman, in the same way that a person who has the negative trait of brazenness, with all the ways that we described it, the lack of sensitivity, and so on and so forth, has no portion in the Torah, like we described at length, in the same way, Mishu ish shafel v'nivza, a person who's like very low in his own eyes, a person who doesn't consider himself worthy, doesn't have any self-worth, doesn't have, and here's the important word, confidence, which is something that so many people are lacking today. No self-worth. They don't feel like they matter. So many of our teenagers, so many of our youth, just they don't feel like they matter. And so much of their lives, and so much of our lives, I'm using a gentler example, but so many of our lives is spent thinking about how to win other people's approval. So many of our decisions. So what does that mean? That means that fundamentally I'm missing something. It's shuffle v'nivze. And it comes out late at night. You know, it comes out when you're alone. It comes out when, and all of a sudden you're like, whoa, you know, who am I? What am I? Right? Says Rebbe Nachman, a person who's like that, ve'ein bo shum, and here's his original formulation, but this is what in Breslov they speak about this a lot, Azus kedusha, to have a holy stubbornness. Right, so the same way we said brazenness, stubbornness, very bad midah, horrible thing. We have to become sensitive as anything there is, to be very gentle, to be very open, to be very kind, to be very, you know, the Jew is supposed to have a heart that's just like so big and so sensitive. We're the heart of the world, you know. Or the consciousness of the world, the conscience rather of the world. But by the same token, if a person doesn't have what's called Azus kedusha, a holy confidence, says Rebbe Nachman, ein lo gamkin chelek b'Torah. Such a person also has no portion in the Torah. Because you're right, when they stood at Har Sinai, they knew what they weren't. They knew that they weren't God, because they had a revelation of the Creator. They knew that they weren't in control because they literally lost control. It was very clear to them that they were being kept alive despite their best efforts to just ease into the infinite light, in which they did. They were blown backwards physically, spiritually, metaphorically, intellectually, on every level, just obliterated. So they knew what they weren't. But you know what else they knew? They knew precisely what they were. There was a certain pride built in, like, okay, we're here having this experience. We're receiving, downloading information, downloading wisdom, downloading depth, so that the entirety of existence for thousands of years subsequent is going to be feeding off of what we're teaching the world. Human history is inconceivable without the Bible, without the Torah. It's inconceivable. Say what you will about parallel universes, like maybe you can imagine a world without... This world is fundamentally impossible to imagine on any level without this thing called Chamishei Chumshei Torah. You know, that large swaths of humanity be called the Old Testament, whatever, the Torah. All of Western society, democratic values, brotherhood of man, human integrity, dignity, fundamental categories of the way that the human being experiences life is from this book, not from the foundation text of Hinduism or Buddhism, as much of an influence as those have had, certainly in the East. But when you think about the derivatives of Judaism, which is Christianity and Islam, you already have most of the billions of people who live in the world, who are influenced directly to one degree or another by this revelation. There's nothing else like it in human history. You can't think of society, you can't think of anything without this set of fundamental principles that are all rooted in trying to create and forge a world that's humane. A world where there are important distinctions that help the human being live within certain guidelines so that he can be happy. So that he can just be happy. Because all of our attempts to break free, so to speak, from the restrictions of this way of living have availed us nothing but the greatest mental health crisis in recorded history. Right? That's what it's gotten us. It's gotten us addicts. It's gotten us, so I was just reading a little bit about this, it's gotten us 23-year-olds who don't have bladders because they abuse ketamine, right? Which is very, very, very prevalent in the UK. It availed us a meaning crisis where people just don't have any reason to get out of bed, etc., etc., etc. So like, it's not going well, you understand? So it's not as if, like, a lot of people think Judaism is the exercise in living a miserable life in this world so that maybe one day I'll get paradise in the next world. And it's like, no. No, you don't understand. The hell that we talk about is not in the next world. It's the hell of living life detached from the paradise that life can be in this world when you live centered, balanced, big, broad-minded, with a universally massive, broad vision, dream for humankind, finding our place. So there was a tremendous sense of pride in that moment, along with humility. Humility along with pride. These two things didn't negate one another. So on one hand, they had no Azus panim. They weren't brazen in that sense. They were just fragile human beings, right? But on the other hand, the pride, knowing who they were, was paramount. And here, yeah.
We find an interesting thing though that it seems that the revelation at Kriyas Yamsuf was much greater than the revelation at Har Sinai, because we're told that a maidservant, when they went through the Red Sea, saw what even Cheskel didn't see. We don't find that. We find other midrashim telling us about Har Sinai, but it seems that that's like the biggest. That's like Spitz.
I'm not sure. Yecheskel Hanavi didn't see what Moshe saw. Yecheskel Hanavi saw on the level of Kaya Mar Hashem. It was a clouded window. Moshe Rabbeinu's clear prophecy. The Rambam describes the difference between Moshe and the other prophets. It was a whole different thing.
That was Moshe. What about verse of Palisar? Did they experience the same revelation?
At Har Sinai, it was Pel Pad Abraham. At Har Sinai, it was no people have ever seen the Lord like you saw them panim b'panim. It was Har Sinai was inestimably higher. I think on a simple level. Kriyas Yamsuf was also very deep, and the heavens opened up, and and everything. But it was on a prophetic level of Koy Amar Hashem, which means to say that people have visions and then have to interpret them, and so on and so forth. But by Moshe, it was just
no doubt. There was
no interpretation. There were no symbols. It was just direct download of clear information.
And that's why they had that experience where they.
Yes, it was too much for them because they didn't have the vessel. And paradoxically, what was Moshe Rabbeinu's vessel? Why was he Zocha? Why did he merit such a lofty prophecy? Because of his humility. The opposite of brazenness. But on the other hand, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know who he was. Is there anybody as brazen in a sense as Moshe Rabbeinu in last week's parsha, who argues with God, who wants to wipe the whole nation out and like forget these people, this is not going to work. Let's rebuild the whole nation from you. And Moshe Rabbeinu stands in the breach. Amma b'peretz. How does that fit with Moshe Rabbeinu's humility? Right? So the answer is because these two things do not negate one another. On the contrary, they combine to create a unique consciousness that on the one hand, sensitive, humble, open, total clarity about who we're not, but it comes with a tremendous sense of certainty about who we are. And we're going to learn. Rebbe Nachman's going to get to that in a minute. So let's see how he. Let's just see.
I just need to add this.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's so on point. Is it Parshas Tetzaveh and Moshe Rabbeinu's name isn't mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
I heard, I can't remember whose name it was, but Melech Biderman, he said that Tetzaveh is Rosh Hashanah Tza'aka Sadal Taksha V'Seshia. Not in that order.
Right.
We're not fussing about those things.
Right.
But Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he saw himself as like, I'm not relevant, I'm not important, but the tefillah, that's something that can't be negated.
Beautiful. Tzakas Hadal, the translation of Tzakas Hadal is a verse in Psalms and Tehillim, where King David HaMelech sings Tzakas Hadal, the cry of the pauper, right? Which isn't just speaking about a person who doesn't have money. It means a person who's dal, a person who's low. Takshiv Soshia, that prayer has tremendous power. God listens to such a prayer. So it's both. It's both. And let's see how Rebbe Nachman.
His name isn't mentioned.
That's right. Right. It's Ava. And by the way, just should know another remez is the reason why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is not mentioned in that parsha is because kilalas chacham or tzaddik hafilu al tanaihiba, that when a righteous person makes a curse in a certain way and says that if this doesn't happen, that's going to happen, then even if that thing does happen, it still comes true because his verbal power is so incredibly powerful. So Moshe Rabbeinu said, right, he said to God, if you got to carry the sins of these people, forgive them for the sin of the golden calf in this past week's parsha Torah reading, and Moshe said, either forgive the people, and if not, then take my name out of your book. So the words for that is v'im ayin, if not, mecheni nam misifrecha, erase my name from your book. So the word misifrecha could spell misefer chaf, from the 20th book, and Tetzaveh is the 20th parsha. So the only parsha where Moshe's name isn't mentioned is the 20th, which is the numerical value of the letter chaf at the end of this word, take me out, misifrecha, which is misefer chaf, from your 20th book, which is the parsha Tetzaveh. Okay, that's not an interesting thing. Fine, going back inside. So that's what the Gemara in Beis says. We've been matnit in the Torah Yisrael. So why was the Torah given to the Jewish nation? It's a strange thing. Because they do have this holy Azus, right? This holy, bold confidence, this courage. I would say courage, holy confidence. So that seems to be the exact opposite of the other two sources that we saw. That the only reason that those generations didn't get the Torah is because they were Azim. Says Rebbe Nachman, it's very simple. There are two kinds of Azus, two kinds of brazenness. Because we know that we're supposed to have this holy confidence, this certainty, knowing who you are, right? The ability of the Jew to withstand all the winds of the world throughout history, to stand firm through fire and water, quite literally, no matter what it was that was swaying them, pushing them, pulling them. We stood firm against the whole world, which is incredibly powerful. Sometimes we think we want to be like cool, so we should be like everyone else. And in a certain sense, it's like the coolest thing you could possibly do is just to do your own thing. I remember a Rebbe of mine, a teacher of mine who I was just in contact with. I sent him an email just telling him again how much gratitude I have to him, because he really saved my life in a certain way. He was my teacher in 11th grade, and he was like one of those star Rebbeim. Like he really loved his students. He nurtured us. I don't remember anything he taught us, you understand? But I remember how much he cared. And he would always take us out of school, take us bowling, take us on trips. He was like super cool. He was a star basketball player. He was able to dunk. He was like one of those like really, really with it, in every sense. So I remember one thing he said that really stuck with me. I still remember where we were when he said it, because it was just as cell phones were starting to really become, a thing where like kids in high school were getting them. Now they get them when they're like 7 or 8. Which is a thing that I cannot actually understand. But little kids have phones, smartphones. So back then it was just the beginning. It was before the iPhone. People still had iPods, and if you remember those big clunky things, which sounds wild because it's like 10 years ago. But it's a whole different world, and it's increasing. It's just getting speeding up. But you had the iPod Classic. Remember, there was like a brick, the 180 gig iPod Classic.
It's still the best thing.
It's indestructible, right? It's like.
It's still better than
anyway, I think those original iPods, you could hear the gears turning inside. It made like certain sounds when you were trying that, and the click wheel, the whole thing. Anyway, unbelievable. So kids were just starting to get phones, And it was like a thing. Like everyone had a phone, and it was like it was the coolest thing to just be on your phone, like it is today. But back then it was like, remember what's it called? Texting with but it was with the 3 letters. So you had to click every button 3 times.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how do we? Anyway, so people are sitting there clicking these plastic buttons like. Right, and everyone's reachable all the time. You get a message, got to respond instantly. It's like everyone's accessible. And I remember Rabbi Ginsburg telling us, there's going to come a day, and I still think he's right, where it will be cool to not have a phone. Because it's like, I'm not at your beck and call every 30 seconds. Like, I'm unreachable. You want to reach me, come visit me in my house. Because I'm busy. Like, I got stuff to do. I'm not sitting on my phone all day, like, just waiting people to demand my attention. Like, it's not happening, right? And so it's just like an interesting paradigm. Why am I saying this? To be able to have a sense of self, to be able to stand up against the winds of the world with your head held high. We don't even know who we are. We don't know what we are. We don't know what heroic means. We don't know. We think that our grandparents, great-grandparents, and bent-over little Jew, walking in Warsaw, pushed into the cattle cars, taken to the concentration camps, and led to the slaughter. Do you understand the courage of these small little bodies with souls that were atomic bomb, atomic level courage, strength, defiance? Another word, Azus. For what? For belief in humankind, for belief in goodness, because that's the whole doctrine. Belief that this is not the end. Belief that good will win out over evil. Is there anything more noble? Is there anything more noble? We have to know who we are. We have to know what's in our DNA. We can't be so quick to just be blown away by the wind, Strong. Azus de Kedusha. This holy Azus. So says Rebbe Nachman, and that's what it means. What the Mishnah and Abba says, very simply, heavy az kanamer. Be az, be bold, right? Bold? Like a leopard. Because we're supposed to learn from all the animals, right? I mean, even in a zoo, sometimes you could see, you learn about different character traits of animals. We're supposed to learn from them. They have what to tell us. Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, understood the language of the animals. What did that mean? It means not that he understood, what the animals were saying. He understood what the animals were saying to him. He was able to learn lessons from them. They're great teachers, animals, very natural teachers. So the leopard teaches us to be bold, to be courageous. Okay, further, when a person goes ahead and he exhibits this courage, this confidence, you know what happens? It's this incredible thing. You give God a little bit, and then he'll shower down even more on you. So when you have a test, when you have a nisayon, a challenge, and you have a choice to make, and you're able to push yourself for however long you're able to push yourself, or whatever it means on your level, in your situation, to push yourself, to strive, to go beyond what's comfortable, your comfort zone. You create a vessel in that moment. You give God oz. You give Hashem, like the pasuk says. Just look a little bit further. The pasuk that we say in Tehillim, Tnu oz lelokim. Give God strength, meaning show him that you're in it to win it. Show him might, that you can't just be pushed over like a little, you have a backbone. Tnu oz lelokim. What's the end of that pasuk? Kel Yisrael, then the God of the Jewish nation, which is the God of all of humans and the whole world, who nosein oz v'satsumas la'am. You give him courage, he'll give you courage. He'll give you so much more ability to carry on and to become stronger. It's connected also to the Mamre Chazal, very famous mitzvah goreres mitzvah. One mitzvah leads to another mitzvah. It's the same kind of construct. You give God a mitzvah, he'll give you more, and then it's a never-ending process. Because we need help from heaven. We can't do it on our own. We can't do on our own. We are not on our own. We are not we without the divine in us. And the Gemara in Kedushin, very powerful. Sofer Rasha L'Tzadik U'Mevakesh La'amisa, the Pasuk in Tehillim says, the wicked one seeks the righteous and seeks to, what does it seek to do? To make him sin? Doesn't say to make him sin. U'Mevakesh Le'Hamisa, to kill the person. To kill the person. Sofa Rasha L'Tzadik U'Mevakesh La'Hamisa. The evil inclination within a person is programmed to push a person to death.
Spiritual death.
Death of all kinds. Because spiritual death is one step closer, Rahman al-Islam, to a person not really having the will to live. And then whether the person actually leaves this world, chas v'shalom, or whether a person checks out on whatever level, that's an aspect of death. Sofer Rasha Litzadik, and keep in mind that it doesn't say Sofer Rasha le Rasha umavakish lamiso, like the Yetzer Hara attacks the wicked person and tries to kill him. No. You're not the wicked one. You're perfectly pure. Each and every one of us sitting around the table for sure. Not a question, is a total tzaddik. We have inside of us a force that's totally external to us, that's pushing us. And it's pushing us not to have a good time. It's pushing us to die. We just don't know what living means and what dying means. And so we think that it's like, no. It's like he wants me to really live my fullest YOLO, like, woo. It's like, no. You don't understand. Like, this is, you're dying a little bit every day. When a person's not plugged into what's possible for the human spirit. We have a whole world to change. Stand up and be a... Can't even say that today. Be a man. Be a woman. Be a person. Be a human, right? Stand up with strength. Because the world is waiting for you. Really, the world is waiting for you. Each and every one of us.
Yes, you read as
I'm sorry, I'm just going to finish this. Sofa Rasha L'Tzadik U'Mevakish La'Miso. And says the Gemara, V'Hashem lo yazven biyado. That's the end of the pasuk. Hashem is standing with you. And the Gemara learns out from that pasuk, B'chol yoyim v'yoyim yitzvah shel adam is gabra love. Every single day a person wakes up in the morning, you wake up with an enemy inside of you. And he's really your biggest friend because he's there to push, to elicit from within you courage. That's the whole point. It's like a personal trainer. Right? Nobody would consider the personal trainer their enemy, although sometimes it feels that way because he's trying to get you to do like 10 squats that you don't think you'll pass out, right? And he's like, no, he's pushing you, right? So nobody hates their personal trainer. You pay the guy. If you hated him, you pay him to stay away. You get a restraining order on your personal trainer. Say, kid, stay away from my house. You're driving me crazy, making me do all these terrible push-ups. Nobody thinks that way. Why? Because you're trying to build muscle, right? So you hire someone to push you. So the Yetzer Hara, but he's programmed, he's serious. The Yetzer Hara doesn't give up. 10 squats will make you do another 20. The Yetzer Hara he's programmed to kill you. And only a thing that's programmed to kill you can elicit from within you the irreducible kernel of life. Right? In response. Meaning the only way to battle the Yetzer Hara, which is pushing you to death, is to push back with so much life, so much vibrancy, vitality, hope. So much hope that it can push him back. But the Gemara says each and every day, B'chol yom yitzur shel adam is gabra love. The Yetzer Hara wakes up with you in the morning, right out of bed. There's a beautiful story with the Kedusha Levi. Can't get into it right this instant because I wanted to finish this in a half hour. We have to get to the other side. Maybe I'll tell it to you a little bit later or a different time. But the Yetzer Hara wakes up alongside the person and he's pushing from the first moment of the day already. Literally, right? Shachris is like the beginning. And to a lot of people, if we lose that battle, it's like the rest of the day, follows suit. If we win that battle, and it is a battle, and it's so terrible and wonderful. If you ever learned the Mishnah Berurah, right in the beginning of Shulchan Aruch, which literally describes like the first or second one, because it's talking about this. Have the Az Kanamer, right? Yiskaber Kari. So you know what he says over there. He lays out the whole dialogue in the morning, in the winter. The Yetzer Hara comes and tells you it's so cold. You're gonna get up. It's so freezing. You didn't sleep long enough. The night is it's just so cold, and it's freezing. And how you're gonna get out of the bed is so warm and comfy. He's gonna hit the snooze button. Another half hour. You'll down a later minion. You know that later minion. It just keeps on going until you're like, oh, there actually is no minion at that time anymore. But that's how it goes. And then in the summer, the Yetzer Hara's argument is you didn't sleep long enough because back then they slept with the cycle of the sunlight. They were out in the fields working, and then they came home and slept very short because the sun set very late. If you learn that piece, you wake up in the morning, you can laugh at how accurate this is. Like you and I are living 180 whatever years after the Chavetz Chaim, which is thousands of years after Chazal, right? Our sages who taught us all these things, like nothing changed. Nothing changed. It's all been foretold. So nobody can excuse themselves by saying like, hey, I'm dealing with this crazy thing. It's like, no, you're not. This is called the human experience. You have it within you to get up. You have it within you to get up. And when you start your day by giving God courage, guess what God gives you back? Bucketfuls and bucketfuls of more courage. You start your day with self-worth. I cannot be pushed around. Not by other people, and certainly not by this voice inside of me. I'm going to be pushed around. Azus to Kedusha. Tenu oz lelokim, give God courage. This is the concept in Hasidus and Kabbalah of Isirusa Lasata, which is translated as an awakening from the lower realms, which means that we give God, we show Him that we're here. We build a vessel. Isirusa Lasata, an awakening from below. When we encounter obstacles, whether it's other people, whether it's our own internal, like we said, the Yetzer Hara, you stand up against it. Oh, I didn't finish the Gemara Kedushin. I'm sorry. The Gemara Kedushin says, like we said, every morning the Yetzer Hara comes and fights a person. And if Hashem wouldn't help us, we wouldn't make it. Because on our own, we don't have what it takes. Because the pasuk says, I'm sorry, right? If Hashem wouldn't help us, we wouldn't have the courage, we wouldn't have the strength. And it learns from this verse. It's Hashem who's saving us, right? So that means that we need God to be a part of the process. On the contrary, all the while that we think that we're the ones that are doing it, so then the Yetzer Hara won, even when it looks like he lost, right? Because that's also not the consciousness that we're trying to develop. We need to develop humility. We need to develop total openness to the realization that we're just puny little human beings, and there's a great God that gives us tremendous strength. But we have to first show Him that we're in it. And then Hashem Tzilcha, God is your shadow. What you give Him, gives you back. Shal Yidei, when we demonstrate that we have strength, we could stand up against these inner forces, external forces, and you use your internal confidence, your sense of self, who you are, your self-worth. The whole world depends on your shoulders. You're a hero of heroes. If there was no other human in the whole entire world but me, I would rectify all of creation. It's on me. Ein hadavar talui ela bi. Right? It's all on me. So then you're giving God. And then you know what happens? When there's an awakening from the lower realms, what does that cause in Shemayim? What's called an Isirusa D'Leila. And in the spiritual realm, there's an awakening, and it comes back down. This is like male and female, that getting to the depth of it. Right, but this is how it goes. In terms of awakenings, stirrings, there's a symbiotic relationship, right, between the husband and the wife that leads to intimacy. This is the depth of what it means. An awakening from below is the female, and that brings about the intimacy, the awakening from above. Because the only reason that the human being is split into male female is because it is it's the this worldly manifestation of spiritual principles, right? In the spiritual realms, the concept of male and female comes down, and here we are. And this courage is sent down to us. But b'chinas, the aspect of Kel Yisrael, who noisin ois. Thank you so much. Who noisin ois v'satsumis la'am. And Hashem is sending courage down to us. Hashem is baruch mashpi aleinu azus to kedusha, that we're able to have courage. Thank you, and strength. Who noisin lanu ois v'satsumis, and then Hashem gives us all this holy confidence. Lamed keneged azus sitra achar shokala azei panim shabadar. Not to be cowed, not to be pushed around, not to be anything. Just to be a total warrior. A total warrior. Like Avram Avinu was a warrior. You know why? Because Avram Avinu was called Avram Ivri. Why was he called Avram Ivri? Because Chazal say the word Aver means side. Aver. La'avor means to pass over from one side to the next. Aver Hayarden, right? Says Chazal, he was called Avram Ivri because the whole entire world, obsessed with polytheistic human sacrifice rituals, was on one side, and one single human being was on the other side, and that was Avram Avinu. The whole world, not like a small sect of humans, The whole entire world was going in one direction, and there was one sane human being, our ancestor, whose DNA is encoded in our bodies, who stood up on the other side. Avram Ha'ivri stood me'aver, and it's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. Echad haya Avraham. He was one. He was the only one. Unbelievable. She'iyah shalami kenegdam ki imay de Azus Kedusha. The only way to make it is with this holy Azus Kedusha. Ki she'ein le Azus Kedusha. Because again, when we don't have this sense of confidence, so it's going to be so hard to do anything. Thank you so much for coming. Yeah, thank you so much for coming. L'chaim. We're not going to be able to do anything. Like we said before, it's impossible to hold on to Torah of any kind unless you're going to be a warrior for it. Now, this person has to be very careful with this. Because it can be a really bad trait. Right? If a person starts asserting, that's another concept, right? Asserting themselves with their holy confidence in a way that's not holy at all, and in a way that starts pushing other people, in a way that's not appropriate, and in a way that's beyond the boundaries of how Azus Kedusha is meant to function. So ki mida rama'oi, that's a really, like we said before, on the contrary, you can lose, chas v'shalom, a person can lose their capacity to connect to Torah if they use this midah in the wrong way. So you got to be very careful with it, when to use it, when not to use it, and how to keep the proper balance. That's the result of a proper sense of perspective. But you still have to have what's called again Azus Kedusha. Azus Kedusha, so important. Holy stubbornness. Now here we come to the last piece here, which is going to be a segue into the other side of the sheet, which we'll go through more quickly. Because the question becomes about anava. Right? Where does anava fit in? If we speak so much about a sense of confident strength, anava is humility. So we know that humility is like the most important trait. So how does that connect? So says Rebbe Nachman, I don't understand. What's the stira? And we already hinted to this earlier. What's the contradiction? Umidas hanavi in legamri. Being humble is a completely different thing than what people ordinarily think it means. Because ve'ikra midas hanava, you know what it really means to be an anav? Not like people think to walk around with their head low and I'm a nothing. I can't do anything. No, it's not anivos. You know what it means to be an anav? It's kashiyeh b'madrega sheyichol lichtav al atzmik ha'mamaysh rabbeinu olav shalom v'yesh Moshe anav me'oid. Is to be so humble that you could write about yourself like Moshe Rabbeinu did in the Torah. Moshe was the most humble person on earth. Doesn't sound very humble, right? It's the strangest thing ever. Imagine a guy is praising his humility. That's like, okay, something's off. Well, the question is something off? Or maybe he's telling the truth. And maybe he's so absolutely cognizant and aware that he as an independent being doesn't exist because all he is a ray of divinity, that it's just the fact. Like, what do you want from me? And beyond that, it doesn't reflect any way on anything that I did to do something special. It's just, this is the way it is. So Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know that he was the most humble person in the world. You better believe he knew it. And he was proud of it in this way. Not proud. He was conscious of it. And we find the same thing with Rabbi Yosef, the strangest thing. Right? Zeu madregas hanava v'tachlis. This is the ultimate form of anivos, the ultimate form of humility. The Gemara in the end of Sota, this bizarre Gemara. Sha'am Rabbi Yosef, we know that all the different tzaddikim were telling all the things that when this ended, we lost Yiras Shamayim. And when this stage of history came, we lost this trait. And when that happened, we lost that trait. Comes Rabbi Yosef, and he says, Al tisnei anava. Don't say that we lost humility. De'ikana, because I'm still here. It was the same kind of concept, right? You cannot say that humility is gone because, like, I'm at the table. And I still have the trait of humility, which is counterintuitive, paradoxical. But if we understand this properly, that a person comes to the realization that the whole sense of self shifts, And therefore it comes along with the greatest confidence, because it's not my confidence. It's the confidence of the divine. When I wake up in the morning and I say, Moda ani lefanecha melech hayeh v'kayim, I'm grateful to you, Shechazarta b'neshmasi b'chemla rab, b'chemla, you gave me back my soul with mercy. What's the last two words? Rabba emunasecha. On a simple level, how do we translate them? Your faithfulness is very powerful, because you said you would give me back my soul, and here it is. I woke up again. People don't wake up. Chas v'shalom, person wakes up, but it's much deeper. What we're saying to Hashem is, I'm aware in the morning when I wake up that Rabba emunasecha, you believe in me so much. You sent my soul back down to this world to become conscious again, whatever that means, to go to sleep, to wake up for a mission, for a reason, not simply to float around. There's work to do. There's work to do. Tremendous amount of healing that all of us have to figure out how we can reveal our own souls in a unique way that no Jew from the beginning of time until now, and no Jew from after us until the end of time will ever be able to do in the way that we could do it. Rabba Munasecha, God, you believe in me so much, you put me down in this world. That leads to confidence, but it's not a confidence of arrogance. It's a confidence of knowing that really I'm nothing. I'm a clump of earth. Every time I breathe, God is breathing into me, bringing me to life. So that I have this strange thing that we call speech, but I have a soul in me that's moving my lips and my tongue and my teeth to produce words. What is that? That's not my mouth. That's not Yaakov Klein's mouth. My mouth is dead. My mouth can't do a thing. There's an neshama inside of me. I'm not a body. We're not bodies. We're souls. And the soul is a revelation of the divine. So I can praise that revelation of the divine all I want, if I really come to the place of realizing that there's no such thing as me, me. Like the Kedushas Levi has a teaching, I think he says it 13 times. Mi ani. What do you refer to when you say ani? You're talking about the soul. There is no you. And the soul is God. So what? So this is all the more true about Rebbe Nachman. One of the things that really turns people off about Breslov, and there are a few, all of which need contextualization and deeper understanding. But when people start to learn a little bit about Rebbe Nachman, we're gonna save this teaching for next week. And then I'll tell you the story about the Berditchever, and then we'll finish. They encounter statements that are very difficult for the mind to grasp. They encounter declarations that Rebbe Nachman made about himself. I'll just list a few of them. You ready? Ani ish pele. Rebbe Nachman said, I'm a wondrous person. V'nishmasi pele gadol. My soul is a wondrous soul. Chidush kamoini lo haya me'olam. There was never a novelty like myself. Me'olam, from forever. Rebbe Nachman said, Ani nahar hamitaher mikol aksamim. He said, I'm a river that cleanses of all stains. Rebbe Nachman said, Ani sava de sava de kedusha. I'm the elder, the ancient elder in holiness. Rebbe Nachman made declarations about himself that are like, you can't imagine a person talking about himself that way. It's like delusional. But when a person understands this mahalach of anivos, that there are people, Moshe Rabbeinu, Rabbi Yosef, who get to levels where they so don't see themselves as themselves that the truth they still have to say. And it's not a question of arrogance or humility. It's beyond all of this. It's just the fact that he's reporting. Rebbe Nachman says, listen, I'm a wondrous soul. Take it or leave it. And he's not boasting. He's just telling you the facts. And Rebbe Nachman speaks about this in Sichas Ran, where he says that the only reason that Rebbe Nachman said all these things about himself, HaSefer Sheli Eschalta de Geula, he said the teaching, the Sefer that we're learning, he said long before the Rav Cookie and religious Zionists, Eschalta de Geula that people talk about, Rebbe Nachman said those words. He said, my Sefer is Eschalta de Geula. He said, if the printers would only know what they're printing, and how many worlds, the spiritual realms depend on this work, on this Sefer, they said they would faint. They wouldn't believe it. Rebbe Nachman said the world hasn't tasted anything of me yet. He said if the world would taste of me, I would be able to keep all of creation in a trance. Everything would be completely batul, everything would be nullified out of the great pleasure of my song and my dance. Rebbe Nachman said that Likutei Moharan was the lowest of the three works that he wrote. Or one higher than that was called a Sefer on Nisraf. He wrote a Sefer and he burnt it. Reb Nassan, who was a Baki, a Goyin, a genius, an expert in Kol Torah Kula, couldn't understand a word of what he was writing. when he transcribed that sefer. And then there's the sefer HaNikanaz, the hidden sefer that nobody ever saw. The Rebbe Nachman said, Mashiach, when Mashiach comes, he'll teach the world the sefer HaNikanaz. Like, what? Now, if Rebbe Nachman is delusional, so then there's nobody as delusional. But if he's really telling the truth, then like, whoa. We ought to really pay close attention to what this person is saying. Because he wasn't speaking from a place of arrogance. Rebbe Nachman was speaking from a place of total, if you don't mind just closing, total humility and total MS. So Rebbe Nachman says that anytime Rebbe Nachman spoke this way about himself, he said he did it mitam kinas sefer, just to show you what madriga you can reach, to strive, and he had to let the world know what they could access if they would connect themselves to this path, to this derech.
How do you know this is true about Nachman? I'm not doubting it, but like...
I am. All of us should. Right? Meaning any thinking person, you have to doubt it. Because who knows? I mean, why not? So Rebbe Nachman addresses this question. Rebbe Nachman speaks about all the things that Rebbe Nachman said, and this is one of my favorite lines in Sichos Ran, because it's so honest, because otherwise you and me could start saying all these wild things about ourselves also. So Rebbe Nachman says by Rebbe Nachman it was different, because he uses these words, don't forget them. Kanira b'chush misvarav hakdoshim. He says Rebbe Nachman reached all the levels that he said, and then more that he didn't even talk about, because the proof is in the pudding. Anybody who learns the Sefer Likutei Moharan, these little lessons we're learning are little lessons. Person who really has experience with Likutei Moharan and has a brain that's capable of grasping, you see right away that this person was a genius and a tzaddik almost like a proto prophetic visionary, whose every prediction came true. Rebbe Nachman made very, very clear predictions about the future, very clear visions. A great heresy would descend on the world. That was at a time when he couldn't have known that. The world was still largely religious. A great darkness is descending on the world, he said. Right? If he wasn't telling the truth of who he is, that would be the most ludicrous statement for a young, hounded, persecuted 39-year-old at the peak when he died. He was a very young man, with at the max a few hundred followers, when other Hasidic masters had thousands upon thousands upon thousands. To say that my fire will burn until the coming of Mashiach. And here we are, sitting in Hend in 2024, we could be learning anything in the world, and we're learning this. Here I am in Hasmanian, teaching Likutei Moharan to a bunch of, year 12 guys who I'm not sure if there's anything else that would hold their attention like Rebbe Nachman. Right? Here I am teaching Rebbe Nachman's story to a bunch of year 11 girls in Hasmo, and it's changing their lives like in the easiest way ever. So it works. So in that sense, that the proof is in the pudding, so we have to respect it. Otherwise, if it was just a bunch of chicken scratches and and some whatever and some silly thing that somebody wrote, and then he said about himself that he's I don't know. But when you produce the body of literature that Rebbe Nachman produced, which has a natural impact that's as explosive and transformative on the Jewish soul as it is, around whose gravesite, as he predicted, thousands upon thousands upon thousands of Jews every single year are adding on to the kibbutz in Uman, to the point that before COVID at its peak was 50, 60,000 Jews, when only 20 years ago it was in the hundreds. Something's happening around this person. Something's happening with this tzaddik. And we get to be a part of that. So that's not a small thing. So we're just saying that when you encounter these statements, you have to see it in the context of this perspective, where the greatest humility leads to the greatest confidence. The greatest confidence is bound up with the greatest humility. One thing is not negating the other. Yeah.
So you're saying everything he's saying is true, but he's got so many people against him, so many opponents. If every word of his is true, then how could you have so many people against him?
It's a very powerful question. We assume that everything the Moshe Rabbeinu said was true, right? Korach and his fellows weren't so happy with that, right? In every generation, there's going to have to be pushback. Sometimes even, and Rebbe Nachman himself addressed this, on purpose. There's a very strong tzad, there's a very strong possibility that the Vilna Gaon and his disciples knew exactly what they were doing historically in opposing the Baal Shem Tov, because they knew that this was necessary for the balance of the world. That Tzemach Tzedek of Lubavitch, the third Lubavitcher Rebbe, said, we owe a great debt of gratitude to the Vilna Gaon, who, by the way, it wasn't just a couple of polemical letters. They made their lives miserable. It was the biggest chasm in Judaism, at least in 100 years, which was the biggest much earlier, because Shabtai Tzvi also shattered communities, and everybody was a suspected Sabbatean and so on. Yaakov Emden, Rav Yonasan Eibshitz, and the Ramchal, But the Tzemach Tzedek said, without the Vilna Gaon, Hasidus might have become wild. Without Hasidus, everything would have died, as the Piasetzner Rebbe says very clearly. Anybody who knows Jewish history knows that. I mean, everything was done, pretty much. The Jewish story was wrapping up, and the Baal Shem Tov came and blew new spirit into the world. But if you don't have the balance, so then who knows where it can go? So Rebbe Nachman said, I'm very happy that I have opposition. He said, they don't know, they're doing me a big favor. That's one approach. There's also the approach of that without opposition from other Jews, other humans, that tzaddik is such a threat to the Satan, especially Rebbe Nachman, who taught everyone never ever to give up. The Yetzer Hara just wants you to give up. It's like a person who's connected to Rebbe Nachman. It's like Rebbe Nachman said, I took the venom out of the snake bite of the Yetzer Hara. Rebbe Nachman said, the snake will still bite you, but the venom's gone. It is a powerful statement. And he's right. Because if a person really connects himself to the Rebbe Nachman's hope, Ein Shem Yish Ba'olam Klal, there's no despair in the world, and no matter what you go through, you're still in the game. And the Satan, the only thing he wants is to gobble you alive. Right? It's to make you fall into despair. So you can imagine that there's going to be a lot of pushback in the spiritual realm against the tzaddik. Says Rebbe Nachman, when the Satan sees that there's, he has opposition, he leaves him alone. He says, okay, the Shpalazeda, whatever, the opponents of Rebbe Nachman, they got him covered already, So Rebbe Nachman says we owe him a great debt of gratitude. Rebbe Nachman spoke a lot about his opposition. So there are different ways of understanding it. It has to be this way. But something so deep? I heard this from my Rebbe, Tzvi Chesed, my Rebbe in Likutei Moharan. I learned Derech from him in Likutei Moharan. With this will end. He said there's a Gemara in Shabbos that talks about how you measure trees. Because back in the day, they didn't have the technology to go all the way to the top of the tree, and either with lasers or at least with tape measures, or tape measures themselves are not long enough. Or how are you supposed to measure a tree? Says the Gemara, very simple. Using certain very sophisticated mathematical calculations, you can measure the shadow of the tree on the floor. And the longer the shadow, right, once you work out a system for it and a certain angle of the sun, because that you can measure. That's here on the ground. The bigger the shadow, says the Gemara, the bigger the tree. Says Tzvi Chesed, everybody looks at Breslov and either they see a bunch of, drugged out, hippies, like people who are just totally not capable of living in any kind of systematic or productive sort of existence, so to speak. They see broken people, they see lonely people, they see a lot of darkness connected to Breslov. And a lot of people are like what's going on here? It's like, what type of tzaddik is this? Tzvi Chesed says, the way to measure a tree is by its shadow. Meaning, the darker the constituency that Rebbe Nachman is able to speak to, that he's able to reach people who no other tzaddik seems to be able to reach. He's able to keep people connected in a way that, he's able to see the redemptive value in every Jew, the Nekuda Tova, when other tzaddikim simply, they cannot find it anymore. He says that shows you how big the tree is, not how small the tree is. I get the chills even just saying it. The bigger the shadow, the bigger the tree. So Rebbe Nachman is a great light, a great light. Great light. And largely we've ignored it. Largely the Jewish world has ignored it. It's a b'chin of Yosef HaTzadik and the brothers. We've persecuted Breslivers, we've mocked them, and in the meanwhile, the humble Jews, and that's how Hashem worked it, the humble ones are getting access. And they have to find ways to bring it to the more and more to the mainstream, because it's the healing. And we're privileged enough to be connected to the healing. What a privilege. L'chaim. Thank you guys so much. Okay, so we didn't get the chance to see the other side, but so Hashem will do that next week. Okay, and it is a continuation. So I hope to see you.
If you do this
Again.
next week, you might as well leave it here then.
Yeah, the only thing is I'll probably add another lesson.
Okay, fine.
So, but I'll take them. I'll take them with the Sheamus. Okay, L'chaim Lolo. Thanks for joining.
We didn't hear the future story.
The Berditchever. Okay, very, 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 very briefly. The Berditchever story is that, very briefly, we were talking about how the Yetzer Hara, like you wake up in the morning and he wakes up with you. So the Berditchever, I thank you so much. The throat is killing me today. I don't know why. The Berditchever had a father-in-law who, like many of the father-in-laws of the early Hasidic masters, was not a fan of Hasidus at all. It was it was the first Yom Tov with his son-in-law, who you heard is a little bit of a wild ecstatic, as the Berditchever was. They describe his prayer, and he would roll on like somersaults under the table. He was all over the place. He was a wild fire, like unbelievable. I think the Yismach Moshe writes in the beginning of Parshas Ba'aloischa, that's a good thing that Hashem didn't give the commandment to light the menorah in the Beis Hamikdash to Levi Yitzchak Berditchev, because he would have shattered all the glass and spilled all the oil, and the menorah would have been mangled because he was so. And he says that's the praise of Aaron lahagit shivcha shalayim shaloi shina. Says Aaron was able to keep his ecstasy in, so the Berditchever never could have done that, right? So the Berditchever was like a mamash fire. So his father-in-law is just hoping that like he's gonna sort of keep it in order. And they get to shul, and the father-in-law is a very respected member of the community, and everybody knows, a very special son-in-law. And they give him ata reisa for Simchas Torah. They give him the opportunity to go and to wear the talis, to go in the front of the shul and take out the Sifrei Torah. So the Berditchever puts on the talis, and he goes up to the front of the room, and the father-in-law is just like davening, like please let this go, okay, And it's silence, and already he's starting to get heart palpitations. And the Berditchever is up there. He takes off the talis, and he goes back to his seat. So like already they could see this is not going to go as planned, right? Okay, then he goes back to the and he puts on the talis again. And then again he takes it off. He goes back to his seat. And then he goes again back to the Amud, and this time people are looking at each other, and the father-in-law is so embarrassed. And finally, and it gets much worse, the Berditchever takes the talis off, he throws it on the bima, and he slams the bima, and he yells, if you're such a tzaddik, and you're such a lamdan, then you do ata reisa. And he walks back to his seat in a huff. So the father-in-law is like, he's beside himself, like, oh my gosh. Anyway, after davening, he got himself together. He said, "What was that? Like, what are you doing?" He says, "I'll tell you." He says, "I put on the prayer shawl, the talis, to go in the front of the shul and the synagogue to lead the service. And my Yetzer Hara came to me, my evil inclination, and he told me, you, Levi Yitzchak, you think you're fitting to do ata reisa? Who do you think you are?" So Levi Yitzchak said right away, I said, "You're right." I put the towels down. I just went right back to my seat. But then I remember, wait a second, I learned Torah. Learn Torah. That's not a simple thing. Learn Torah. I went back to the thing and put it on. He came back to me. He said, "What are you doing?" I said to him, I learned Torah. He said, "Levi Yitzchak, don't you understand? Whatever Torah you learn, I learn. I'm in you. I am you. I'm with you." He says, "Okay, you're right." He takes it off and he goes back to his seat. But then he remembered, I really work on my kedusha. I'm a tzaddik, a person. He's aware of his level. Goes back to the bima. The same thing happens. Put it on the talis, and he says, "Levi Yitzchak, you're a tzaddik. Who do you think is being a tzaddik with you? I'm in you. I'm with you." So then Levi Yitzchak finally said at the end, I screamed out to the Yetzer Hara that if you're such a tzaddik and you're such a lamdan, right? You're such a Torah scholar, then you do it. And of course the talis is just there on its own. And the message of this story, of course, is that the Yetzer Hara on the contrary, it's not we who are accompanying the Yetzer Hara along his journey. He is an illusion. The Yetzer Hara cannot do ata reisa. We are in control. And that's what the Berditchever is trying to demonstrate. Without the Berditchever, right, the talus lays there formless. The Yetzer Hara is an illusion. He's real in as much as we expect him to be real. The biggest, the strongest thing you can do to the Yetzer Hara is the same thing as the strongest thing you can do to a very defiant teen. Is to look him very deeply in the eyes, to see the little child inside, and to address him in a way that shows that you don't buy the tough exterior. It's like, I see you for who you are. Like, who are you fooling? You're a holy little soul. Like, what do you think you're trying to pretend like you're this mighty, thug? You're not. You're just a sweet, gentle little kid. So let's reveal that within you. Let's connect on that level. Let's be real. You don't need to put up all these fronts. You can do the same thing with the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara comes to you. He pretends like a storm, how mighty, how powerful, and this and that. You know what you do to the Yetzer Hara? You look at him and you say, "Oh, you're so sweet. You're so sweet. I'm not falling for your game. I see you for what you are. You're a holy angel, Yetzer Hara. You're a messenger from the divine. You're here to challenge me." It's like, cool, let's dance. Want to dance? We'll dance. Pull him into the circle. The more that you give him credence, the more powerful he gets. The more that we really treat the Yetzer Hara like they do in schools, it's such a strong Yetzer Hara. The more that we talk that way, the stronger it gets. But when we build our own holy confidence, it's like, it's pathetic. It's like, I'm not falling for it. So then he fades away. He melts away. And he really does become your best friend. Okay. L'chaim. You got yours.